Hello friends and foes alike, welcome back to League Unlock. My name's Eric and it's time to preview the Final Four, the semifinal matchups in the LCS. There's no fancy loser bracket like EU, although NA should steal that because it is probably now the best format of all the major regions, but we're just stuck with your typical 4 teams left, semis into finals, and not even a third place match anymore. But TSM, Cloud9, not accustomed to this being in semifinals. Should be the finals. They've played 6 times in the LCS finals, with TSM winning 4 of those. And I know in summer they played in semis, so clearly it is a new era. But these are 2 of the most storied, probably the 2 most storied franchises in the history of the LCS, and it's going to be very exciting. They were the 2 of the top 3 teams the entire regular season, but Cloud9 did 2-0 TSM in those regular seasons. Obviously, you've got Sneaky and Bjergsen as the longest standing members of both of their squads. They played in pretty much every best of against each other, save for Cloud9's first split that they won when Reggie was still the mid laner for TSM, which goes a ways back. And you see both these squads, they love Herald. The Rift Herald first and second in acquiring that. And TSM at second with 67 was 10% more than the team in third place. So both these guys love the early game, which is definitely not what these series have been about in recent years. It was about getting to 35 and 40 minutes and just seeing which squad could get the better of one another when it came to team fights. But this series, you can expect a whole lot of action in the pre-15 mark. Both these guys want to get some huge early leads. And even though Cloud9 did 2-0 them in the regular season, I don't think that's something to say as a huge negative against TSM, because both of these games, TSM had a decent lead in that early game and they had legitimate chances to win these games. Game 1 was, of course, the debut of Silas in North America for Flickr, where he put up a great performance, and one of the rare times you actually saw Broken Blade playing a tank in some of these matchups. So, you know, there was a lot to take from this one. And then, of course, the second time they played was that disgusting poke comp with the Varus Zoe that TSM ran, and it looked like this game was locked up for them. They had a huge gold lead. They were knocking on Cloud9's door. They lose 2 team fights back-to-back. Game's over. C9 wins. You see, TSM still had a gold lead even when they lost the game, when the Nexus went down. So not much to take from those 2 regular season games, aside from if you're TSM, you probably say we had a legitimate chance in both of those games. So I expect this series to be very close. The biggest surprise for me would be if it didn't go to 5 games. I could see either squad coming away with the win, but I'm expecting a lot of back and forth in pick ban. Who knows if we see Blabber or Golden Glue come in, but you can damn well be sure that Sven Skaren will at the very least be starting in this matchup. But what the most exciting matchup for me to look at is in that top lane. I mean, it's not Jensen versus Bjergsen in solo lanes anymore. We're talking about Broken Blade and Flickr, and obviously Niski is not who's replacing Jensen. But the Broken Blade and Flickr are a very compelling matchup for me. Obviously, Flickr had a fantastic split yet again for Cloud9, and Broken Blade, his numbers don't stand out, and even in games that they win, it's not like he's putting up disgusting laning numbers. A lot of the time, he's actually pretty far behind when it comes to laning phase, but there's going to be some carries picked in this matchup. There's no doubt. Broken Blade excels on a lot of those picks. He has not played many tanks. You saw that game where he played Sion against TSM. That really is one of only 3 games, I believe it is, that he's actually played a tank. It's a small handful. Flickr, we've seen still some Ornn and some Poppy. He's one of the few guys still playing Poppy in North America, at least. So I expect a lot of attention up here. It's going to be Sven Skaren and Flickr. We know they have a nice repertoire together, and Acadian and Broken Blade, they'll either single-handedly win you the early game or sometimes put you at a serious deficit. But Broken Blade, his team fighting is fantastic. Vladimir, Nico, these are picks we haven't seen Flickr really bust out that much, but you know, something like a Jace is going to be something that's going to be heavily picked for these guys, and both of them have really, like I said, taken over some of these team fights and have been the main emphasis in that top lane for them. Don't expect many tanks. We're still on patch 9.6, by the way, so Not going to be too many tanks. 9.7, and when MSI starts rolling around, you'll probably be seeing a lot less carry top laners going around for most teams. But 9.6 is still the dream, where we get to see the Jaces of the world. Vladimir, Akali getting flexed. Both these guys. I think Akali is going to be permabanned or just so influential on a lot of these draft phases. I'm excited to see what Reaper can come out with, and as well as Ziggs for TSM, because there's going to be a lot of heavily contested top laners to be going through in this matchup. And when it comes to laning, you probably favor Licorice. He has the better numbers, and if there's no jungle attention, maybe he gets away with it. But I actually think Broken Blade has taken over some of these team fights in more cases than Licorice, and he's even playing Licorice's champion with the TP Ignite Hecarim, something we've seen across a couple of different regions now over the last few weeks. So maybe that's a pick that's going to pop up in that top lane. I give a slight edge, probably still to Licorice in that matchup, but Broken Blade has been playing a whole lot better. Sven Skaren is going to get the edge over Acadian when it comes to jungle. I think Grig, maybe Blabber, either of those guys coming in, but I still think it's a slight edge to Cloud9. Mid lane, obviously going to go with Bjergsen, and I think Sven and Smoothie, laning phase and outside, I'd probably give a slight edge to TSM. I think this is the redemption year for Team Solo Mid. This game's going 5 for sure. I would be shocked again if it didn't go to 5. I think TSM continues to smurf and continues to let the rest of the LCS feel their wrath. 11 of 12, and it should have been 12 of 12, really, 12 wins in a row if they had taken down that Cloud9 matchup, and then who knows, we'd be looking at different seedings in these playoffs, but it's going to be a close one, and it's going to be another chapter in the already historic rivalry of Team Solo Mid versus Cloud9. Coming up after the break, the other semifinal matchup in North America, FlyQuest versus Liquid, and remember, FlyQuest took them down in Week 8 to start this losing streak. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to League on Lock. My name's Eric as we preview the LCS. Continue to preview the LCS semifinals, the 1-4 matchup, Liquid versus FlyQuest. Plenty of storylines and past relationships coming to fruition. In this one, you've got Pobelter going up against his former squad from 2018, so that one is still fresh. And then you've also got Wild Turtle going up against Doublelift from, the 2017 TSM era when Doublelift took a split off. Wild Turtle took his spot, and then Doublelift came back, and they wanted to compete for that spot, but Wild Turtle just said, I'll just go to FlyQuest. And here he still is 2 years later as the starting AD. Obviously, Liquid are going to be huge favorites in this matchup. But remember, in just Week 8, which is very recent, and FlyQuest came away with that win. And we know that Liquid kind of slumped and stumbled their way into the playoffs. They were still able to lock up that top seed. And Steve was talking smack on Twitter. He said, if TSM wins, we'll pick them. Well, they didn't. They picked FlyQuest because, of course, that is on paper the easier option, and Liquid went 0-2 against TSM. So obviously, clear, easy decision to take up FlyQuest. But Pobelter, he's been playing a lot more carries this split, and that's because he's not playing with Doublelift. I think he's been freed up more on FlyQuest. I think he wants that added responsibility because he's one of the more veteran guys on this roster alongside Wild Turtle and Santorin, the two young guys in Viper and JJ. But what was, again, I know we're going a couple weeks back now, but what was so impressive about their win against Liquid is because they were getting dumpstered in the early game, but they completely bounced back. A couple of fights around a Baron. They got their 3 kills and the Baron pit, or the Baron kill, and took the game over from there. So Liquid, they were definitely looking very vulnerable to close out the split. Now you could just say that's kind of just losing focus when you've been completely destroying the league for the entirety of the split, basically. We already saw this happen to G2 and Griffin when we were talking, middle of the split, we were talking, can any of these teams go undefeated? But within a week or two, all 3 of those top teams just kind of hit a bit of a slump, probably, the dog days of summer, as they say, even though it's not summer, it's spring/winter in this split. But it's just the long grind of a season. Clearly, these top teams were getting tired out. But obviously not how you want to roll into playoffs, and we'll see how these top teams perform, starting with G2 and Liquid. But they're still going to be big favorites. FlyQuest, I think they have more of a chance than people maybe think. I would go maybe 70-30 in favor of Liquid. They're still big favorites, but there is a chance for FlyQuest, and one of the main spots you're going to be looking at is that jungle role. A couple of all-pro junglers in Xmithie and Santorin. I probably would have put Santorin over Xmithie in that first team all-pro jungler so far. Xmithie had a couple of bad games to close out the regular season with Liquid. Santorin left right where he was in 2018 summer as one of the best early game junglers in the entire league. Most things run through him, everything runs through him in the early game, and even getting fights set up and started in these later games. He's been fully activated on a lot more damage-centric and carry junglers this split. You know, Elise, Kha'Zix, Kindred, he seems much more comfortable on those type of champions as opposed to some of these tanks. And the jungle matchup, we saw some very creative pathing in their first matchup. Obviously, this first blood where Xmithie completely read Santorin like a book. And that was actually one of the worst early games that we saw from Santorin. Obviously, he bounced back with a couple of key picks to get FlyQuest back in that matchup. But I think Xmithie actually kind of won that jungle matchup in this one, and one of the few times where you can say Santorin actually got out-jungled in the early game and lost that. So, I mean, that's something to be proud of for him. I actually like Santorin in this matchup. I think he's going to be favored. I think we've seen him try that creative pathing. It didn't work in that Skarner-Rek'Sai matchup, but I think he is going to try that again and be able to get some early ganks off and really get the ball rolling for FlyQuest. The last few weeks, they've actually been a better early game than Team Liquid, getting some decent leads. We know Liquid is one of, if not the best squads when it comes to that mid to late game, team fighting and macro, things like that. So hopefully for FlyQuest, they can get a big early snowball rolling. And another way they could maybe win is going in that top lane. You're talking Impact versus Viper, and I know it's a meme that Impact, he can't play carries. You know, he gets stuck on the Vladimir, and people are mad. He goes on Yorick, people are upset. Stop picking him that. Just put him on Shen, Maokai, and Sion every game. Well, I said before, we're not on patch 9.7 yet. But Viper is a guy who came storming in as a rookie. He's getting put right onto carry champions because that is what he was known for. And he had 2 game-winning plays in games 4 and 5 for FlyQuest against the Guardians on Irelia and Ryze. So I think a big emphasis and a heavy emphasis of the pick ban in this series should be getting some favorable matchups for Viper where he can just completely stomp in that top lane. And the beauty for them is he's basically guaranteed a ban. I think Riven is going to be banned 5 games in a row. It's one of the most banned champions against FlyQuest because Viper is so well-versed on that champion. And you know he could probably steamroll some of the matchups against Impact there. So that's another big win condition that FlyQuest can potentially play through. And also, another thing I think they should look at is playing around the dragon. We know Liquid absolutely loves it. They are far and away. They have the most dragon percentage out of all the teams in the LCS. And this is something we saw even in 2018, how heavily they prioritize those dragons. So maybe FlyQuest can take advantage of that fact, and whether it's either punishing Liquid on other parts of the map or just convincing them into unfavorable fights around the Dragon Pit, because you know sometimes Liquid will overextend. It'll be hard for FlyQuest. I still think Liquid gets it done 3-1, but there is a chance for the boys in green. That's all the time today for League Unlocked. My name is Eric. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time.